The Provocateur and the Martyr, an in-depth analysis of the life, influence, and legacy of Charlie Kirk. Introduction: a single shot on a university campus. On September 10, 2025, during a characteristically confrontational Prove Me Wrong event at Utah Valley University, a single bullet struck the neck of Charles James Charlie Kirk, ending the life of one of the most influential and polarizing figures in 21st century American conservatism. The act of violence, described by many officials as a targeted political assassination, was broadcast across the internet in chilling real-time videos, capturing the final moments of a man whose career was built on the very premise of public debate. Kirk's death, however, was not an end. It was a catalyst, instantly and irrevocably transforming him from a controversial activist into a martyr of the Christian right. This report provides a comprehensive analysis of the life, career, ideology, and posthumous legacy of Charlie Kirk. It traces his meteoric rise from a suburban Chicago garage to the epicenter of the Make America Great Again MAGA movement. It examines the powerful and well-funded political machine he constructed in Turning Point USA, TPUSA. It deconstructs the deeply divisive nature of his rhetoric, celebrated by his followers as fearless truth-telling, and condemned by critics as racist, xenophobic, and extreme. Finally, it assesses the profound and galvanizing impact of his assassination, an event that served to consolidate his once fringe ideas into the Republican mainstream, ensuring his influence would not only endure, but exponentially expand in his absence. Kirk's story is a chronicle of a new kind of political power, one forged in the crucible of social media, culture wars, and populist fervor, culminating in a martyrdom that has reshaped the American conservative landscape.
Part 1. The Making of a Movement Leader, from suburban Chicago to the national stage. Charlie Kirk's journey from a politically minded teenager to the founder of a national movement was shaped by a unique combination of suburban upbringing, early political exposure, and a pivotal rejection that redirected his life's trajectory. His formative years reveal a pattern of ambition, media savvy, and an anti-establishment ethos that would become the cornerstones of his political brand. Early life and influences. Charles James Kirk was born on October 14, 1993, in Arlington Heights, Illinois, and raised in the nearby Chicago suburbs of Arlington Heights and Prospect Heights. His family provided a stable, professionally successful, and politically engaged environment. His father, Robert Walter Kirk, was an architect whose firm was involved in the construction of Trump Tower, a biographical detail that would later seem prescient. His mother, Catherine, transitioned from a career as a trader at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange to become a mental health counselor. Kirk's parents were described as moderate Republicans, with his father being a major donor to Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign, indicating a family well ensconced in mainstream conservative circles. He had one younger sister, Mary, who would later become an art curator in Chicago and, in a striking ideological contrast to his brother, an ardent supporter of progressive politician Bernie Sanders. Kirk's political awakening began early. Raised in the Presbyterian Church and an Eagle Scout in the Boy Scouts of America, he was exposed to the tenets of discipline and civic duty. In middle school, he discovered the works of free market economist Milton Friedman, which ignited his attraction to Republican principles. By his junior year at Wheeling High School in 2010, his interest had become active participation. He volunteered for the successful U.S. Senate campaign of Republican Mark Kirk, no relation, and began listening to the influential conservative talk radio broadcast, The Rush Limbaugh Show.
His nascent talent for activism and media provocation also emerged during this period. In his senior year, he organized a boycott of the school cafeteria's cookies to protest a price increase and, more significantly, wrote an essay for the conservative news outlet Breitbart News alleging liberal bias in high school textbooks. This article led to his first national media appearance on Fox Business at the age of 17, an early sign of his innate ability to leverage provocative commentary into a media platform. A defining moment in Kirk's life came in 2012 with his rejection from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. This event served as a powerful catalyst, redirecting his ambition away from a military career and toward full-time political activism. Although accepted at Baylor University, he instead enrolled briefly at Harper College, a local community college, before dropping out after just one semester to dedicate himself to his burgeoning political project. This biography is fundamentally shaped by a narrative of institutional rejection. Having been turned away by West Point, he then chose to reject the traditional path of higher education himself.
This personal history became a potent rhetorical tool, framing him as an outsider who succeeded in spite of and in opposition to the very establishment institutions, academia, government, and the military that he would spend his career critiquing. His personal story of being an outsider who triumphed without the credentials of the elite perfectly mirrored the populist anti-establishment message of the MAGA movement he would later champion. His biography was not merely background, it was the foundational template for his political brand. The genesis of Turning Point USA. The creation of Turning Point USA was the direct result of Kirk's decision to forego a conventional path for one of political entrepreneurship. In May 2012, at 18 years old, Kirk delivered a speech at Benedictine University's Youth Government Day that captured the attention of Bill Montgomery, a retired marketing executive and Tea Party activist. Montgomery, impressed by Kirk's passion and rhetorical skill, urged Kirk to postpone college and pursue activism full-time. On June 5, 2012, just a month after their meeting and the day after Kirk graduated from high school, the two co-founded Turning Point USA as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Montgomery acted as a behind-the-scenes mentor, handling the administrative and legal paperwork, while Kirk became the public face of the nascent movement. The organization's beginnings were modest, launched from a garage, with Kirk later admitting he had no money, no connections, and no idea what I was doing. The critical turning point came at the 2012 Republican National Convention. There, Kirk met Foster Fries, a prominent Republican donor, and successfully persuaded him to make a 5-figure donation to the organization. This initial seed funding was crucial, setting TPUSA on a path of rapid financial growth and validating Kirk's model of direct, charismatic fundraising. From its inception, Kirk's strategy was a fusion of grassroots activism and media savvy. His career was not launched by organizing alone. It was ignited at the intersection of provocative commentary and conservative media. The pattern established at age 17, using a Breitbart article to land a Fox Business appearance, became the blueprint for TPUSA's growth. Later, viral video clips of his campus appearances became a primary tool for securing a steady stream of donations that would transform the organization into a political powerhouse. This demonstrates that from the very beginning, his model was not just about on-the-ground activism, but about creating media-friendly content to build a national brand and attract the financial resources necessary to scale his vision. Part 2. The Turning Point USA Juggernaut, Anatomy of a Modern Political Machine. From its humble origins, Turning Point USA evolved into one of the most formidable and well-funded political organizations in modern American conservatism. Under Kirk's leadership, it grew into a multifaceted juggernaut, with a massive campus presence, a sophisticated media operation, and a powerful fundraising apparatus. While its stated mission promoted traditional conservative principles, its operational focus was on waging aggressive culture wars, making it a dominant force in shaping the attitudes of a generation of young conservatives. Mission, growth, and structure. The official mission of Turning Point USA, consistently stated across its platforms, is to identify, educate, train, and organize students to promote the principles of freedom, free markets, and limited government. This mission statement, rooted in the language of classical liberalism and pre-Trump conservatism, served as a palatable and non-controversial entry point for prospective student members and donors. However, the organization's practical activities and Kirk's public rhetoric quickly evolved beyond these economic principles to focus on the more volatile and mobilizing terrain of the culture wars. Observers noted that TPUSA's primary strategy centered on making provocative claims and publicly inciting outrage. This strategic approach proved immensely successful. The organization's growth was explosive. By 2015, TPUSA had a presence on over 800 high school and college campuses. By 2025, that number had surged to over 3,500, making it what the Chronicle of Higher Education described as the dominant force in campus conservatism. This expansion was supercharged following Kirk's assassination. In the days after his death, TPUSA reported receiving tens of thousands of inquiries about starting new chapters, signaling a moment of unprecedented recruitment and consolidation.
To manage its expanding influence, TPUSA developed a sophisticated corporate structure with several key affiliates. Turning Point Action, a 501c4 organization launched in 2019, designed for more direct political advocacy and election-related activities that are restricted for a 501c3 nonprofit. TPUSA Faith, an arm dedicated to religious outreach and mobilizing church communities around conservative political issues, reflecting Kirk's later ideological shift toward Christian nationalism. Turning Point Endowment, an affiliate responsible for managing the organization's charitable and long-term financial activities. And Blexit Foundation. In 2023, TPUSA merged with the Blexit Foundation, an organization founded by Candace Owens, aimed at encouraging Black Americans to leave the Democratic Party, further expanding TPUSA's reach and branding. This structure allowed TPUSA to operate on multiple fronts, from nonpartisan campus activism to direct political action and faith-based organizing, all while maintaining a cohesive brand under Kirk's central leadership. A deliberate bait and switch appears to have been at play. The official, benign mission provided a respectable veneer for recruitment and fundraising, while the confrontational, culture war-focused reality is what actually drove engagement, media coverage, and energized the base. The high school division, for instance, was not described as a club for young economists, but as a mobilization of America's most spirited anti-woke warriors. This dual identity was key to its success, allowing it to appeal to traditional donors while practicing a form of populist activism that was far more effective at mobilization. Campus activism and national initiatives. Kirk's strategy was executed through a combination of on-the-ground campus activism and large-scale national events. His bread and butter remained his direct engagement with students on college campuses. His signature Prove Me Wrong events, where he would sit at a table under a tent and debate students on contentious topics, became a hallmark of his activism and a rich source of viral video content. Beyond these informal debates, TPUSA launched several controversial national initiatives aimed at what Kirk saw as rooting out left-wing bias in education. These included the Professor Watch List, a public database of professors accused of discriminating against conservative students or advancing leftist propaganda. Critics argued the watch list threatened academic freedom, stifled free speech, and led to the targeted harassment of academics. The School Board Watch List, a similar initiative targeting school board members, was launched as part of a broader conservative backlash against public schools over issues like critical race theory and LGBTQ+ inclusive curricula. Complementing its campus-level activities, TPUSA organized massive, professionally produced national events that functioned as both training conferences and political rallies. These gatherings, such as the Student Action Summit, SAS, America Fest, and the Young Women's Leadership Summit, WYLS, drew tens of thousands of young people annually. Featuring top conservative speakers like Donald Trump, pyrotechnics, and concert-like stage production, these events were designed to make conservatism feel exciting and countercultural, transforming political engagement into a high-energy, immersive experience. The financial engine. The fuel for TPUSA's rapid expansion was a formidable and ever-growing financial engine. By 2025, the organization Kirk started with a small donation had grown into a political empire with reported assets of $95 million. In fiscal year 2024 alone, TPUSA reported revenue of $85 million, a dramatic increase from just over $440,000 a decade prior. This financial success was built on Kirk's remarkable ability to cultivate relationships with a broad network of wealthy conservative donors. Early backers like Foster Friess and Florida philanthropists Rebecca and Bill Dunn provided crucial seed money. Over time, this base expanded to include some of the biggest names in conservative funding.
Foster Friess, individual, 5-figure donation. 2012. One of TPUSA's first major backers. Rebecca and Bill Dunn, Dunn Foundation. Foundation, $3,399,000, 2014 to 2022. Provided crucial early challenge grants. Bradley Impact Fund, Donor Advised Fund, $23.6 million, 2014 to 2023. A major dark money contributor. Ed Uline Family Foundation. Foundation, $1,550,000, 2014 to 2021. Tied to the founder of Uline, a major GOP donor. Donors Trust, Donors Capital Fund, Donor Advised Fund, over $4 million, 2016 to 2023. A key vehicle for anonymous dark money donations. Bernard Marcus, Marcus Foundation. Foundation, undisclosed, tied to the billionaire co-founder of Home Depot. Decent Foundation. Foundation, approximately $1.8 million, 2016 to 2023. Associated with Dallas-based investor Darwin Deason. Note: this table represents a partial list of major donors identified in the available source material. Contribution figures are based on reported data and may not be exhaustive. A significant portion of this funding came through dark money vehicles like Donors Trust and the Bradley Impact Fund, which allowed donors to remain anonymous, obscuring the full picture of who was financing the organization. This financial structure, however, was not without controversy. Investigations by ProPublica and the Associated Press raised questions about TPUSA's financial practices, alleging misleading financial claims, a lack of independent audits, and instances of leaders enriching themselves. Most notably, the organization reportedly paid for Kirk's 2021 wedding reception by billing it as a fundraiser. The power of this financial base became starkly evident after Kirk's death. Lynn Friess, the widow of Foster Friess, immediately pledged $1 million for new chapters, and other major donors like Doug Deason indicated plans to double their contributions, ensuring the organization's financial stability and fueling its posthumous expansion. The trajectory of TPUSA's influence took a significant turn after Kirk's death, moving from an external advocacy group to a quasi-official partner of government bodies. Before his assassination, TPUSA was a powerful nonprofit
but was often in conflict with university administrations and viewed as an outside agitator. In the weeks following his death, this dynamic shifted dramatically. The U.S. Department of Education announced a partnership with TPUSA to produce educational programming for America's 250th birthday celebration. Even more strikingly, Oklahoma's State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Ryan Walters, mandated the establishment of TPUSA chapters in every high school across the state. This move from being an external critic of the education system to an internal, state-sanctioned partner represented a monumental victory for Kirk's movement. His martyrdom provided the political capital necessary for government institutions to officially embrace and integrate an organization previously seen as a radical force operating outside the established system. Part 3. The ideology of a MAGA architect. Charlie Kirk's political philosophy was a dynamic and potent blend of traditional conservatism, right-wing populism, and, increasingly, Christian nationalism. He was a master communicator who translated complex political ideas into digestible, often inflammatory content for a mass audience. His close alliance with Donald Trump placed him at the heart of the MAGA movement, and his extensive media empire and published works served to articulate and disseminate its core tenets to a new generation.
Core political and economic tenets. Kirk's ideological journey began with a foundation in traditional conservative and libertarian principles. In its early years, TPUSA's mission focused on promoting free markets, fiscal responsibility, and limited government, ideas drawn from thinkers like Milton Friedman. His economic platform consistently advocated for tax cuts for individuals and corporations, reduced government spending to combat inflation, and deregulation. However, this traditional framework evolved to incorporate the populist, nationalist economics of the Trump era. He became a vocal proponent of America First policies, including opposing the outsourcing of American jobs and supporting strategic protectionism. On social issues, Kirk's positions were staunchly and uncompromisingly conservative. He was a fervent opponent of abortion, arguing it should be illegal even in cases of rape and incest. He was an absolutist on gun rights, famously stating that some gun deaths every single year were an acceptable price to pay for the preservation of the Second Amendment. He was a sharp critic of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, which he viewed as a form of reverse discrimination, and vehemently opposed LGBTQ+ rights, which he termed sexual anarchy. He also championed traditional gender roles, frequently urging young women to prioritize marriage and motherhood over professional careers, and criticizing the use of birth control. His stance on immigration was particularly hardline. He advocated for a complete halt to both legal and illegal immigration, to prioritize citizens, and was a prominent promoter of the Great Replacement, a conspiracy theory alleging a deliberate plot to replace white Americans with non-white immigrants. His foreign policy views were largely isolationist, aligning with the non-interventionist wing of the MAGA movement. He dismissed Russia's invasion of Ukraine as a border dispute and was critical of U.S. involvement abroad. The main exception to his isolationism was his strong support for Israel, although reports after his death suggested this view was evolving and that he was facing pressure from pro-Israel advocates to
maintain unwavering stance. Issue, stated position, representative quote. Gun rights. Absolute support for the Second Amendment, viewing civil gun deaths as an acceptable cost. I think it's worth it to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment. Abortion should be illegal in all circumstances, including cases of rape and incest. Asked if his 10-year-old daughter, if raped, should carry the baby to term, the answer is yes, the baby would be delivered. Immigration. advocated for halting all immigration and promoted the Great Replacement conspiracy theory. The Great Replacement strategy is a strategy to replace white rural America with something different. Race and civil rights. Denied the existence of systemic racism and called the Civil Rights Act a mistake. We made a huge mistake when we passed the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s. Gender and feminism. Advocated for traditional gender roles and submit to your husband, Taylor. You're not in charge. Religion in politics. Rejected the principle of separation of church and state, advocating for Christian nationalism. There is no separation of church and state. It's a fabrication, it's a fiction, it's not in the Constitution. The Trump alliance and the MAGA doctrine. Kirk's relationship with Donald Trump and his family was central to his rise and influence. Though he admitted in 2016 that he was not the world's biggest Donald Trump fan, he quickly pivoted to become one of Trump's most loyal and effective allies. He spent the latter part of the 2016 campaign assisting with media arrangements for Donald Trump Jr., forging a powerful alliance with the president's earliest son. This relationship solidified his position within the Trump inner circle, leading to his chairmanship of Students for Trump in 2019, and a presidential appointment to the U.S. Air Force Academy Board of Visitors in 2025.
He became one of the most prominent voices of the MAGA movement, credited with energizing and mobilizing a new generation of young voters for Trump. President Trump himself acknowledged Kirk's unique talent, stating, "No one understood or had the heart of the youth in the United States of America better than Charlie." Kirk, in turn, articulated the intellectual and philosophical underpinnings of this new political alignment. In his 2020 book, The MAGA Doctrine, he argued that the Republican Party was, in some sense, no longer a conservative party, no longer the party of Reagan, but instead a Trump-remade populist party. He framed the movement as a defense of Western civilization and a restoration of self-rule for ordinary Americans against a corrupt globalist elite. Media and communication strategy. Kirk's influence was amplified by his mastery of modern media. He built a multi-platform media empire that reached millions daily. The flagship of this operation was The Charlie Kirk Show, a podcast and radio program that regularly ranked among the top news shows on platforms like Apple Podcasts. Through this show, he delivered his daily analysis of political and cultural events, mixing in history and philosophy with his signature confrontational style. His social media presence was immense and expertly managed. He was an early and effective adopter of platforms popular with young people, including TikTok, and even advised President Trump on its strategic use for his campaign. Following his assassination, his digital footprint expanded exponentially, gaining millions of new followers across YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X, formerly Twitter, demonstrating the enduring power of the brand he had built. An analysis of his audience demographics reveals a key element of his strategic success. While TPUSA's branding and activism were relentlessly youth-focused, the audience for his most influential media platform, The Charlie Kirk Show, skewed significantly older. Data from Triton Digital revealed his core podcast listeners were in the 55-plus demographic for both men and women, a profile more aligned with traditional talk radio than a youth movement. This indicates that Kirk's primary strategic genius was not just in activating young people, but in using the idea of a conservative youth rebellion to mobilize and extract resources from an older, more established conservative base. He created a product, a vibrant, growing youth movement that appealed directly to the anxieties of an older generation concerned about the country's future. This older demographic provided the loyal media audience and the crucial funding, while the campus chapters provided the visible foot soldiers, the media-friendly content of campus debates, and the tangible proof that their investment was yielding results. Kirk functioned as a generational bridge, translating the energy of the youth for the consumption of and funding by their elders. Authored works and intellectual framework.
Kirk sought to provide an intellectual foundation for his activism through a series of books published throughout his career. These works trace the evolution of his thought and strategic priorities, from broad conservative principles to a focused assault on the institutions of the American left. Time for a Turning Point, 2016, Brent Hamacek, outlined his foundational views on free markets and limited government, serving as his earliest published political manifesto. Campus Battlefield, 2018, Non, argued that American universities have become, quote, radical re-education camps, unquote, and provided a playbook for young conservatives to fight back against leftist ideologies on campus. The MAGA Doctrine, 2020, Non, defined the principles of Trumpism as a populist nationalist movement and argued it represented the future of the Republican Party, distinct from the conservatism of the past. The College Scam, 2022, Non, presented a, quote, 10-count indictment, unquote, against the American higher education system, accusing it of financially exploiting and ideologically, quote, brainwashing, unquote, students. Right-Wing Revolution, 2024, Non, outlined a strategy for conservatives to combat progressive cultural trends, quote, wokeism, unquote, and, quote, save the West, unquote, through cultural and political activism. Stop in the Name of God, 2025, Non, a reflection on his religious faith and the importance of honoring the Sabbath, reflecting his turn toward Christian-centric themes.
This body of work reveals a consistent theme: the identification of American universities as the primary source of cultural and political decay. His books collectively argue for a populist and later a Christian nationalist counter-revolution against what he perceived as a corrupt, anti-American elite concentrated in academia. This ideological evolution was not subtle. In TPUSA's early years, Kirk advocated for a secular worldview and explicitly defended the separation of church and state. By the early 2020s, this position had been completely reversed. He founded TPUSA Faith, began to argue that there is no separation of church and state, and embraced Christian nationalist doctrines like the Seven Mountains Mandate, which calls for Christians to take dominion over all sectors of society. This was a fundamental and strategic ideological pivot. It allowed him to tap into the powerful and highly motivated evangelical base, aligning his organization with the most energetic faction of the MAGA movement. This ideological flexibility was a key factor in his sustained growth and expanding influence. Part 4. A Legacy of Controversy: Rhetoric, Misinformation, and Criticism. Charlie Kirk's public career was defined as much by controversy as by his organizational success. His confrontational style and uncompromising rhetoric generated a constant stream of criticism from opponents and watchdog groups who accused him of bigotry, promoting dangerous conspiracy theories, and fostering a toxic political environment. An examination of his most contentious statements and actions, supported by independent fact-checking, is essential to understanding the full scope of his impact. Divisive rhetoric and accusations of bigotry. Kirk's commentary on race was one of the most frequent sources of controversy, with groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center describing his rhetoric as divisive, racist, xenophobic, and extreme. He made numerous statements that were widely condemned as racist, including questioning the qualifications of black airline pilots. If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. And claiming that prowling blacks go around for fun to go target white people in urban America.
Stating that prominent black women in media and government, such as Joy Reid and Michelle Obama, do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously, and had to steal a white person's slot through affirmative action. He also consistently worked to undermine key figures and achievements of the civil rights movement. He called George Floyd, whose murder by police sparked a national reckoning on race, a scumbag. He described Martin Luther King Jr. as awful and not a good person, and in one of his most radical statements, declared that the passage of the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a huge mistake. His rhetoric on gender and sexuality was equally inflammatory. He frequently targeted prominent women, telling pop star Taylor Swift to reject feminism, submit to your husband. He was a leading voice in the anti-LGBTQ+ movement, denouncing what he called the LGBTQ agenda and calling for Nuremberg-style trials for doctors who provide gender-affirming care to transgender individuals. He also made numerous statements deemed Islamophobic, asserting that Islam is not compatible with Western civilization and that large, dedicated Islamic areas are a threat to America. For Kirk and TPUSA, this constant stream of controversy was not an unfortunate byproduct of their activism, but a central element of their growth strategy. Provocative statements were designed to generate media outrage, which in turn energized their base, drove fundraising, and increased their national profile. As the Washington Post noted, TPUSA's model centered on making provocative claims and publicly inciting outrage. This created a powerful feedback loop. A controversial statement would be amplified by liberal critics, which Kirk would then frame as an attack on free speech and conservative values, leading his followers and donors to rally in his defense. The more outrageous the statement, the more potent the cycle. In this light, his long list of controversies can be seen not as a record of failures, but as a series of successful marketing campaigns. Promotion of conspiracy theories and disinformation. Beyond his divisive social commentary, Kirk was a significant purveyor of conspiracy theories and political disinformation. He was a key figure in the effort to overturn the 2020 presidential election, repeatedly promoting false claims of widespread voter fraud. His organization, Turning Point Action, actively participated in the Stop the Steal rally on January 6, 2021, sending buses of patriots to Washington, D.C. to fight for this president. During the COVID-19 pandemic, he was a prominent voice of skepticism and opposition to public health measures. He denounced mask mandates, spread misinformation about the efficacy and safety of vaccines, and referred to vaccine requirements as a form of medical apartheid. The veracity of his public statements was consistently challenged by independent fact-checking organizations. A review of his record on PolitiFact revealed a pattern of making claims rated as mostly false, or pants on fire, with 0 claims rated as true. FactCheck.org also frequently debunked his statements on topics ranging from the Civil Rights Act to election integrity. Despite this well-documented record of spreading falsehoods, his influence and popularity only grew. This paradox highlights the declining political currency of objective fact-checking in a hyper-partisan media environment. For Kirk's audience, being fact-checked by outlets they perceived as part of a biased liberal media was not a mark of shame, but a badge of honor. It reinforced their belief that he was speaking a truth so dangerous to the establishment that it had to be suppressed. In this context, a pants-on-fire rating became a signal of authenticity, not dishonesty, demonstrating that his followers valued ideological affirmation over factual accuracy. Organizational scandals and criticisms. TPUSA itself was the subject of numerous scandals and criticisms that raised questions about its internal culture and legal compliance.
A 2017 investigation by The New Yorker described the workplace as being rife with tension, some of it racial. The report detailed how the organization's then national field director, Crystal Clanton, was exposed for sending text messages that read, "I hate black people, end of story." Furthermore, TPUSA faced repeated allegations that it may have violated its 501c3 tax-exempt status, which prohibits direct participation in political campaigns. Reports emerged of high-ranking TPUSA officials, including Kirk and advisor Ginny Thomas, wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, coordinating with the presidential campaigns of Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio in 2016. The organization also came under fire for covering the expenses of students who attended a pro-Donald Trump event on Fox News, an action that tax experts suggested could constitute improper partisan activity. These incidents, combined with the financial controversies surrounding the organization's audits and spending, painted a picture of an organization that often operated on the edge of legal and ethical boundaries in its pursuit of political influence. Part 5. The Aftermath, Martyrdom and the Consolidation of a Movement. The assassination of Charlie Kirk was a seismic event that sent shockwaves through the American political landscape. The act of violence intended to silence him had the paradoxical effect of amplifying his voice to an unprecedented degree. His death was not the end of his movement, it was its apotheosis, transforming him into a martyr and serving as the single most powerful catalyst for the advancement of his political project. A movement galvanized. The national reaction to Kirk's death was immediate and intense, sparking international attention. On September 22, 2025, less than 2 weeks after the shooting, an hours-long memorial service was held at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. The event was a testament to his stature within the conservative movement, drawing a crowd of tens of thousands and featuring eulogies from the highest levels of the U.S. government, including President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and other cabinet members. The service was framed not just as a memorial, but as a call to arms, an old-time revival for the MAGA movement. The outpouring of support for Kirk and his organization was tangible and massive. The assassination acted as a multiplier, exponentially increasing his influence and the reach of his organization in a way that would have been impossible had he lived. Before his death, Kirk was a highly influential figure, but was still seen as too divisive by some mainstream conservatives. His violent death sanctified him, erasing any previous intra-movement criticism and making it politically untenable for any mainstream Republican to speak ill of him. This new untouchable status is quantifiable. Organizational growth. In the days following his death, TPUSA received over 54,000 inquiries about starting new high school and college chapters. Financial surge. Donations poured into the organization, with major backers pledging to double their contributions and new million-dollar pledges being made to support the creation of new chapters. Media dominance. His social media accounts gained millions of new followers overnight. His YouTube channel alone added over 1 million subscribers in a week, and his Instagram following nearly doubled to 12.5 million. His books, including The College Scam and The MAGA Doctrine, soared to the top of Amazon and Audible bestseller charts, and his podcast became the #1 news show in the country. This martyrdom multiplier effect allowed the Republican establishment to fully and uncritically absorb his entire ideological framework. As Donald Trump Jr. declared at the memorial, addressing the broader conservative movement, "This movement is your home now." Kirk's death was the final irreversible event that merged the most aggressive wing of the MAGA movement with the core of the Republican Party. The legacy of a champion of free speech. The political fallout from Kirk's assassination was complex and deeply contradictory, particularly concerning the principle of free speech. Kirk was widely eulogized by his allies as a fearless champion of the First Amendment, a warrior for reason and open debate, who believed that even ugly, gross, and evil speech was protected. However, in the immediate aftermath of his death, this principle was inverted and weaponized. A coordinated campaign emerged, led by conservative influencers and Trump administration officials, to identify, ostracize, and seek the firing of individuals who posted critical or offensive comments online about Kirk. This reversal of the right's long-standing critique of cancel culture was swift and effective. Vice President J.D. Vance publicly urged listeners to call their employer if they saw anyone celebrating Kirk's death, and Transportation Secretary Duffy pressured airlines to fire employees for their social media posts. The most prominent example of this pressure campaign involved late-night host Jimmy Kimmel. After Kimmel delivered a monologue criticizing the political response to Kirk's death, Federal Communications Commission Chairman Brendan Carr suggested that the ABC network could face regulatory action and should take action against the host. Shortly thereafter, ABC announced it was suspending Jimmy Kimmel Live indefinitely. This move was widely condemned by critics as an act of jawboning, in which the government leverages its influence to pressure private entities into suppressing speech it opposes. This series of events revealed a strategic redefinition of terms. For Kirk's allies, free speech became a concept that applied only to their own speech. Speech critical of their martyr was reframed not as protected expression, but as a dangerous incitement that warranted professional and social retribution. The legacy of the champion of free speech was thus immediately used to justify a widespread campaign of speech suppression. The future of Turning Point USA. The future of the organization Kirk built was secured with the unanimous appointment of his widow, Erica Kirk, as the new CEO of Turning Point USA. A former Miss Arizona, businesswoman, and podcast host, Erica Kirk quickly demonstrated a media-savvy and fiery public presence similar to her late husband's, vowing to make Turning Point USA the biggest thing this nation has ever seen. Under her new leadership, and propelled by the momentum of Kirk's martyrdom, the organization embarked on an even more ambitious mission. The most significant development was TPUSA's aggressive and now successful push into the K-12 education system. Having long been a critic of public education from the outside, the organization was now being welcomed inside. The mandate in Oklahoma to establish chapters in every high school and the partnership with the U.S. Department of Education signaled a new frontier for the movement, signaling its transition from a countercultural force to a sanctioned part of
the educational establishment. This posthumous achievement marked the ultimate victory for Kirk's vision, the institutionalization of his movement at the heart of American civic life. Conclusion: the enduring imprint of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk's life and violent death left an indelible imprint on the American political landscape. In just over a decade, he transformed a fledgling student group operating out of a suburban garage into a multi-million-dollar political empire that fundamentally altered the trajectory of the modern Republican Party. His journey from an ambitious teenager to a central and ultimately martyred figure in the conservative movement is a case study in the dynamics of 21st century political power. Kirk's true genius lay not merely in his fundraising prowess or his rhetorical skill, but in his intuitive grasp of the anxieties of a changing America. He understood that the battle for the nation's future would be fought not on the grounds of economic policy, but in the trenches of the culture wars. He mastered the art of modern media, building a digital brand that was both aspirational and confrontational, and used it to channel populist anger into a potent political force. He successfully bridged a generational divide, using the spectacle of a youth rebellion to mobilize the financial resources and media attention of an older, activated conservative base. His ideology was fluid and strategic, evolving from a secular free market libertarianism to a fervent Christian nationalism that resonated with the most energetic wing of the MAGA movement. His rhetoric was consistently provocative and often crossed lines into what critics identified as bigotry and disinformation. Yet for his millions of followers, these controversies were not liabilities, but proof of his authenticity, a sign that he was a fearless truth-teller, unafraid to challenge a corrupt establishment.
The assassination, the ultimate act of silencing, paradoxically ensured that his voice would become louder and more influential than ever. His death sanctified his message, transforming him into a martyr whose ideology could no longer be questioned within the conservative mainstream. It galvanized his followers, flooded his organization with unprecedented resources, and provided the political capital to embed his movement within the very state institutions he had once sought to dismantle. Charlie Kirk's legacy is thus one of profound and unsettling contradictions. A champion of free speech whose memory was used to suppress dissent. A political outsider whose martyrdom secured his movement's place in the establishment. And a provocateur silenced by violence, only to have his ideas cemented as a dominant and enduring force in the 21st century Republican Party.